But the real depth of the meaning is found in Revelation as to what happened. What was this Day of Atonement representing? The Day of the Atonement is the object of the whole service of this day, is represented as atonement. And you could say that really the whole Bible is about atonement. I mean, everything in the whole Bible. Everything from the whole history to the end of man is about atonement. It's about sacrifice. That's what it all centers around. That's why I say Leviticus chapter 16 is kind of the hinge pin for the Old Covenant and New Covenant, from all things past and all things forward have to do with atonement. So the Day of Atonement becomes the crescendo. It becomes the very top, the very necessary understanding for us as Christians and for understanding of what is transpiring in the world. Expiation of sin. That's the doing away with sin in the highest and the fullest sense then possible. Meaning that this Day of Atonement that we've just read about in Leviticus chapter 16 was the atonement to the highest and best expiation of sin at that time. It's the best that they could do. But it is a day when sin is revealed as exceedingly sinful. Why is it that I say that this Day of Atonement, is the day that is revealed as exceedingly sinful? Why would I say that? Because they had to do it every year. They did it once a year. But what they did was exponential into what it was that they ordinarily did for sin. There was a daily sin sacrifice. There was sacrifices as they desired to draw nigh unto God, they would bring sacrifices. But this particular day, with all of this elaborate ritual, is really meant to bring attention to the fact that sin is exceedingly sinful. It must be. Look at this, all of this, whatever it is that is representing our transgressions need covering. Whatever God meant by this, and I'm sure that it was an enigma to most of them, what? Look at the elaborate ritual. And having them had experienced Nahab and Abihu's death, they also know the seriousness of what is transpiring if it's not done correctly or not done at all. I mean, you would have some major concerns while all of this was going on. Wouldn't you? So I'm saying that the overall theme that God is wanting to present to them today and to us who are looking at it in the rears is the exceedingly sinfulness of sin. I'm telling you, if you can't get a hold of the exceeding sinfulness of sin, you can't get a hold of the atonement. You can't get a hold of it in depth. You can shallowly admit and mentally assent to that it was a historical fact that you believe is presently in effect, but you really have no depth. That's why we have no love and esteem in depth for God and Christ, is because we've not understood the exceedingly sinfulness of sin. If we were to grasp the exceedingly sinfulness of sin, we, like Isaiah and others, would fall on our knees and say, woe is me. Woe is me. I am a filthy man. And think of it, it was Isaiah who said that. One of the closest men of all time in the Old Covenant to God. And that is what he gleaned when he said, oh, I'm but dust. And he saw how filthy he was. So on this Day of Atonement, it was every day sin was dealt with in the daily offerings, but this day was set aside to declare the utter insufficiency of those daily offerings for sin to deal with all sin. It was a day when then, like the day the author of Hebrews wrote chapters 8 and 9, paralleled his day, in Paul's day, a parable for the time now present. Meaning, as Paul was alive, he saw the fulfillment of the Messiah, or the Day of Atonement typology, was in his day. And he recognized that what they were doing in ritual for the Mosaic Day of Atonement had been fulfilled by Christ the Messiah, his Lord, that knocked him off that donkey. He said, you know, these things that this thing that Moses was writing about and performed in Leviticus chapter 16 is nothing more than a parable for the time that I now presently live in, Paul was saying. Referring to the day in which he lived, teaching the temple sacrifices of Judaism could not, as touching the conscience, make the worshiper perfect. Making the worshiper perfect would mean that the worshiper be acceptable unto God. Being perfect. You know, whatever God declares is perfect enough. Whatever God declares as mature and sufficient is sufficient enough. But what it was that they were doing in the Day of Atonement ritual and all the rest of the Mosaic bloodletting ritual was not enough to cause the worshiper to be accepted as perfect or acceptable. It is in the ritual of the Day of Atonement we find the depths of the tentacles of sin in creation. Can we not? All of that ritual does point toward the depths of the tentacles of sin into all creation. You know, it's not just isolated somewhere over there. It's everywhere. It's a disease that has permeated every cell of everything that it comes in contact with. Now, the Day of Atonement points forward in time to the restoration of all things. Restoration and reconciliation of all things. Not just some things, but all things. That future time when heaven comes to earth with the ingathering of all unto their inheritance to that supreme Sabbath day rest. That supreme Sabbath day rest. I don't want to go too fast today. For some reason, I don't. But that supreme Sabbath day rest that is spoken of in Hebrews chapter 4 has a complete fulfillment that begins at the end of the millennium period. That's the end of the Sabbath days. That's the beginning of the Sabbath of Sabbaths, the 8th day. That which is referred to here, that's fulfilling, is the restoration of all things, is that is done in that last day that God has allotted, the end of the 7,000 years. Some learned men say that Yeshua was baptized.